Watch is a network of constituent groups. Everybody in it is, like everyone in the country, in a constituency, and we are trying to engage our MP on the climate and the nature crisis and how those two might be related. And in this picture, you can see a number of people with their MPs. Down at the bottom is Dan Norris, who replaced Rees-Mogg, happily for that constituency. They're very pleased. You can see Hugo in the middle. Unfortunately, his MP's been cut off. And there is Ian Room there with Ricky. Actually, Simon's with a group of MP Watch. They were they were having an event outside the constituency office. And over here is John Whitby with Dave and Laura. So our USP is that constituents who have a right to see their MP can take meetings and try to ally themselves with their MP and to enable them to do the best job that they can for the constituency on trying to get net zero done. In my mind, lots of people would want you to say and nature, but in my mind, you can't really get net zero done unless you address the nature crisis. The two things are so intertwined. So we celebrate when the MPs do good things, and we draw attention to the less optimal stuff, but we always try to be courteous, and we're non-partisan. And we also base quite a lot of what we're doing on science, but you'll come to see that in the minute. Unlike lots of campaigns, I think MPs are getting used to being bombarded. Every now and then, campaign, the CAM bill actually has been a bit of a longer running one, but every now and then there'll be a sort of snow flurry of activity. And I think the MPs in the MP offices quite often will say, oh, it's just, those guys doing their thing. And instead of that, what we're trying to do is make a human relationship between us as constituents who have grave concerns and with the MP who is also a human being. Now, if you have an outright climate denier, that's a hard thing to do. But luckily, after the last election, we have a new influx of MPs, and a lot of them may not be beautifully climate informed, but there aren't many deniers in their ranks. So our first project is this allyship. And in order to be an ally, we try and make it really easy for the MP. You have to follow the climate debate. You agree to MP Watch hosting regular meetings with other green groups in the constituencies. Now, it may be that that is 2 or 3 times a year. It doesn't have to be onerous for the MP, and MP Watch will, sometimes the groups are big, sometimes they're smaller, but we will get Friends of the Earth, Transition Town, and the Greens, other people into the room to have a big conversation about what's going on in the constituency. They will try to address net zero both within the constituency and at national level, and they will accept our briefings. Now, in a way, it's like, why would you say no to any of that? It's a little bit motherhood and apple pie. So there's a positive kind of seduction going on. Another thing that we've just started doing is producing, we've only done one so far, but there's another that is being prepared as we speak. Science-based, non-partisan briefings on climate and nature implications of legislation that's going through the government. So if there's legislation that is going through Parliament, through the House of Commons or through the House of Lords, of course they go through both, they do the weekly path, then we will, where appropriate, produce a briefing with scientists to say, these are the implications of what you're doing. So for example, the Labour government is going to try to do a massive house building plan. But are those houses fit for the future? Absolutely not. So what we want to do is draw attention to that so MPs have the facts. Now, MPs are also bombarded by briefings sometimes, but our USP is it is constituents giving to their MP these documents which have been put together by scientists and saying, I want you to look at this. What we're not saying is, I want you to vote one way or the other, because of course MPs are whipped. But what we want to do is build the network and build the knowledge base so that later on in this parliament, or maybe even in the next parliament, when there are political opportunities, there will be a lot of very informed MPs working hand in hand with their constituents, ready to take advantage. We all know that Parliament hasn't really done enough. So this is a way which partners very well with the CAM bill of increasing knowledge and across Parliament. I've probably taken slightly too long. Here is this is the page on our website that has our first briefing, which is on carbon capture and storage, and it's done really well. Our next one is on water, and we're expecting that to do even better. So this is here are our work streams. We're building relationships with MPs, targeting net zero. We're informing the MPs with our briefings, and we're also campaigning. Another thing actually that should be included in here is that we are getting the MPs that we are most friendly with to ask questions in the House of Commons based on our briefing documents. So Caroline Voden's done that. Adrian Ramsey's putting a written question about carbon capture and storage for us. And we're just about to ask a lot of, particularly Lib Dems this time, to put carbon capture and storage questions to Ed Miliband on the, I think it's the 15th, when the next environmental question time is. Now, that's quite an exciting thing to work as a constituent, to ask your MP if they will put a question. What we don't want, carbon capture and storage is a bit of a complicated one. So with quite a few of those, we're getting them initially to put written questions in, because the last thing we want to do is work with MPs and make a fool of them. But those rather excitingly are coming up. And actually, Hugo, who's on the call, we're hoping Charlie Maynard might take one of those questions. So Francis, how am I doing?
Yeah, well within time, but we could take questions early if you like.
Okay, well, I'll just give a very whistle-stop tour of our history. So we started in 2021 with Steve Baker Watch, and Steve Baker Watch was Steve Baker was a climate denier, and we decided to push against him. But actually, then somebody in a neighbouring constituency called Hugo, who's on the call, said, I don't have a climate denier, but I would like to monitor my MP for what they're doing on climate. And so we began to also have a general approach to general MPs, not just focusing on the negative cases. And since the last election, that has been entirely our focus. We are looking to make climate allies.